Dzień dobry, drodzy Państwo. Tutaj Kaja Klimek, jak zawsze w festiwalowym enturażu. Akredytacja, co prawda zeszłoroczna, tegoroczna tylko w online, ale to podbija zawsze tą festiwalową atmosferę. Bardzo się cieszę, że spotykamy się w ramach krytycznego poranka, żeby porozmawiać z jurorami konkursu dokumentów muzycznych. Cała trójka jest już ze mną. Nie martwcie się, nie będziemy rozmawiać o szczegółach ich decyzji, bo ona owiana jest tajemnicą. Ja sama nie chcę wiedzieć, kto wygrał, bo to przecież nie jest jeszcze temat na ten moment. Jeden z jurorów uśmiecha się i potakuje, reszta się uśmiecha, bo się uśmiecha. Jeden dlatego, że rozumie, reszta pewnie dlatego, że nic nie rozumie z tego, co mówię. Więc pozwólcie tylko, że zmienię język na angielski, żebyśmy nie byli w tej dziwnej sytuacji i wtedy przedstawię naszych drogich jurorów, a oni przywitają się z Wami. Także na tym kończę fragment w języku polskim. And now for the English version. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at 60th Krakow Film Festival. My name is Kaja Klimek, and I'm really happy that we are meeting for this critical morning with the jury members of DocFilm competition. They are with me. I said that already in Polish before, that one of them was smiling, two of them were smiling too, but not because they were understanding what I was saying, but because they are just nice people. So I'm really happy that you found time to join me on this Q&A Zoom session online for our festival. And now for the introduction, because I never said who's here with me. With me are Steven Nomura-Shibu, the chairman of the jury. Hi, Steven, how are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
Steven is the director and producer, also works a lot with musicians, so that's probably the connection with the... I'm gonna try not to be this kind of funny TV host. I'm really sorry about this.
That's great.
He worked on a film that was awarded at 58 Krakow Film Festival, Ryuichi Sakamoto Koda, beautiful film about the amazing musician. Thank you for being here with us. I hope we're going to have a chance to talk also a bit about your work with musicians, because Ryuichi is not the only person that you had the chance to work with. And as a fan, it's so nice to meet a co-producer of Lost in Translation. That's like amazing thing also for me to be, while I'm a huge fan, as so many people in the world of that film, it's nice to meet you and talk about your work. So hello once again. Rachel Leah Jones, the winner of last year's Krakow Film Festival for the film Advocate, is also with us. I'm really happy that we have a chance to talk because the way you work with film, the political engagement as a filmmaker is something that I really admire. So I'm just really happy that we can also talk probably a bit about political engagement of musicians and this part of culture. Rachel is, of course, documentary filmmaker and producer, so I'm really happy that you are here with us. I know it's a bit later during the day in Tel Aviv. And how are you today, apart from that late part of evening?
Fine. Everything is fine. Things are calm.
Oh, great. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Leszek Możdżer, musician, composer, also producer, and of course, composer of film music. So I need to mention that. In Poland, everybody knows your name because of the work that you did, the recording of many famous albums. If I say something about like my connection to the work of our guests, I remember your concert in Kino Kijów, that it was maybe like 10 years ago, and you tried to leave, I guess, 4 times. And the last time you went on stage with the suitcase that you just like really need to go to catch the train. So it's really great to meet you in person, and that we can have a chance to talk about the relationship of film and music, which I know is really important for you. I need to mention that last year you composed the music for Ikar, like really accomplished Polish film about another jazz musician, Mietek Kosz. Thank you for joining us. And are you in Kraków or where are you?
So right now I'm in the village. It's near Iława. It's in the middle of Poland. You know, it's a sweet place full of nature, and it's a good place to be, you know, reconnect with Mother Earth.
Oh, that's also an interesting way to spend spend the evening. Thank you for being here with us. So after this introduction, I want to touch upon all those things that I kind of mentioned when I was introducing you. I want to talk a bit about the relationship between film and music. And of course, I want to ask you about your taste in film and in music, because those two words are really connected for me also. So I'm going to try to navigate between those two areas. So Stephen, I would like to start with you. Tell me, if you think about the relationship, it's going to be like those big questions, but then it's nicer and easier to develop on that. When you think about a relationship between music and film, for you personally, what does it really mean?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a big question too. I mean, there's a lot between film and music. I think they are related crafts to me. They're almost like cousins in that both mediums are time-based, right? And I personally just love music, maybe even more than I like film because I work in film. So I feel more like when I watch a movie, it can easily become work for me. I tend to analyze the budgets and how many shooting days they had, this and that. And so for me, oftentimes, personally, you know, listening to music is a no-brainer. Watching a film starts to feel a little bit like work, but then I'm blessed with, you know, working in a field that I really love, so I can't complain. Mm-hmm. But I think the relationship is really deep and symbiotic to me. And I also personally feel that there's really not a great distinction between the two when you actually work in creating a film. In that once you put like any kind of audio together with music in the audio track of a movie, you're essentially kind of blending the two together. So I tend to feel like everything is almost music in a film. And you could actually have a silent sequence and have syncopation in it by the way you cut the shots and so forth. So I really enjoy rhythm, both in music and in film. So to me, it's really my two passions. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of almost interchangeable. They're like cousins or brothers or sisters.
Oh, cousins, brothers or sisters. That sounds really nice. Like all these interconnections between arts are coming to the surface when you think about it that way. Rachel, how would you answer a similar question? Like for you personally, what does it really mean, those connections between music and film?
Wow. I mean, I have to pick up from Stephen because the last film I made is the first time I ever worked with a composer. I ever scored a film. I always worked, every time there was music in a movie I made, it was diegetic. I took it from the space or from the environment, from, you know, it was character. And it was the first time that I sort of fictionalized. I created a character to go with the documentary. And if I go back and think about the film that preceded that was heavily musical, it was also at Krakow in 2012, I think. A film about my family, my father, and my father's a musician. All my siblings are musicians. All of the story is that my father has had 5 children with 5 different women, and all of them were dancers. So I'm the only not musical person in the family. So, and I think of myself as really far away from it. I think of it as something, as a craft that is. It's a little bit like rocket science. I mean, it's something that other people possess magically that I don't. I never tried to learn it either. But I've gotten feedback over the years, because over the years I have moved more and more into editing my own films, that I am in fact musical, but I didn't know it. But that's a medium where I feel very comfortable being musical. And I think that's for the first round.
Yeah, but this story of 5 children who are dancers, and you are a storyteller, so you can tell a story about that. That's also like a interesting part in this bigger picture of those relationships.
It was interesting. I'll just say one more thing about it. My father's a flamenco guitarist, and the center of flamenco is cante, is song. And the film is narrated. I narrate it, and there's something unconsciously that happened with one of the main feedbacks I got was that the narration was very much like a letra, like flamenco kind of lyrics, and a little bit also the way that it was delivered. And that was utterly unconscious, but you know, if you love music and you love image and you love sound, if you're doing it right, again, unconsciously, that magical thing, then the pieces are, you know, they're bouncing off of each other, they're echoing, they're complementing. So there was something sort of very flamenco about the way that the voiceover came out. I don't sing flamenco, I don't speak Spanish, but there was a relationship there. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible not to create a relationship, otherwise, you know, unless it's you're consciously.
Yeah, and that's also about music as the, you know, language or something that you kind of can communicate with it or through it without really kind of verbalizing it. That's where the magic happens, as we can say. Leszek, how would you answer the question? Just to remind you that I was asking about this personal.
Yeah, you know, life itself is one big movie. Yes, so anything here is actually a soundtrack of your life. And of course, you know, tonal system. Music is a mathematical system. It's made of 12 notes. That's all material we are using.
Nice. Unexpected music.
Yeah, and the tonal music it's called major minor system. So it's either major chord or minor chord. So it's like in life, you know, either something is good or bad. So this is exactly the same in music. So I see it as a very clear reflection of what we experience in life. And also tonal music consists of cadenza, which means dominant and tonic, which represents problem and solution. So exactly those things we are experiencing in life and in music. That's why we understand music as a part of a movie, and it usually works.
So I have a question, like when you were meeting as the jury, was he also playing the piano during your like conversation?
No, I was lucky enough to play piano here. I didn't plan it, you know, it just happened. So I'm very happy I can use it.
Improvised movie of life, let's call it. Actually, I'm recording, so it is kind of a movie that's happening at the time that we are making it, right? So that's interesting that we already kind of have a soundtrack for it. Stephen, would you add something after what we were saying before? Do you have any more thoughts on that manner after what you heard from your co-jurors?
No, not particularly. It's really hard to top what Leszek just did as a musician. When somebody can actually play notes and start talking about keys and stuff, that's when the filmmaker in me comes out and prefers to be quiet and just be able to listen, I think.
So I'm going to ask you about that actually, like when you are a director of a film about a musician, how do you approach those people? Because as we have the example just right in here, you never can expect what's going to happen. So I wonder if you have some rules for yourself as a filmmaker that you know that, okay, I'm going to try to stick to my guns even when stuff like that happens. I know that it's possible. Or you like, or is it more like jazz music for you? I mean, like that you just follow what's going to happen. How do you approach those people? Those people.
All that I know is that whatever rules that I would try to have for myself, they never really worked. And I always ended up shooting myself in the foot. So I think, you know, maybe what I've learned through my experience is the best approach is to, of course, have like hopefully good intentions and to know where you generally want to go with a project and know what your hopes are and know what your wishes are, but also to just be improvisational enough to let things happen as they unfold. I think the best moments for me as a documentary filmmaker have been the ones that I never could have planned for. And so that's what I meant, I guess. When someone like Leszek just starts to suddenly play the piano, I get into that mode where like I just don't want to speak. I want to observe because something magical might happen, as it did.
Rachel, you were nodding a bit when Stephen was saying about improvising and adjusting yourself while you are making a film. Would you agree with this? Is it a bit like, you know, following the musician that it's always unexpected when you make a film?
Yeah, totally. Or let's say, like, if there's that silly saying, you know, life is what happens when you're making other plans. So a good documentary is what happens when it's not following the treatment, right? Absolutely. I mean, I tend to make, or I used to make more essay type of films. And so, you know, even if there was a search, an enquête of some kind, you know, it wasn't as if, you know, I didn't already have my hypothesis, maybe my thesis, you know, I already had my synthesis in mind, and I was just going to go visit the antithesis just to, like, you know, make it real. And the best things that have ever happened is when it really just, you just don't have the same exact, it might be similar, it might be close, but you don't have the exact same bottom line that you assumed you would have going into it. And then you grow, and then something happens to you, and you learn something. There's some degree of genuineness to the whole process. I'm not somebody who goes into a project generally with no idea what I'm looking for. It's impossible to also find things if you have no idea what you're looking for. I can't imagine doing that. But you've got to stay ready to roll with punches, or to find a big gaping hole of lack and say, okay, well, how do I take this lack and transform it into, how do I take all this emptiness that suddenly presented itself to me, and this big I don't know with a big question mark in it, and then start to turn that into a thing in and of itself? What is, you know, what does it mean that it's not clear, or that we don't know? Or so turn a weakness into a strength, but to work with it, not to try to jump over it or ignore it, but actually stand there and stare.
Oh. What happened? What's going on with this?
Ordinary.
Totally.
Yeah.
I have no idea what happened.
Oh, you're back.
Did I go?
You went away, but now you're back. We
It was like
stayed.
Wizard of Oz, or I don't know, Alice in Wonderland.
Thank you for staying. Then I have no idea what happened. It seems like something was going on with my connection, but it seems that the conversation is still recording. So let's hope for the best.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that was improvisation on my side, I guess.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, Rachel, because the things that you were saying were so, and now I miss a part. But
I don't know from what part, but let's assume it recorded, and worst comes to worst, let everybody fill in the gaps by themselves, whatever it was Rachel wanted to say. Yeah.
I was till the moment when you were saying that it's not, and when you did this, like not to jump over something, but just to adjust yourself. That's when something jumped in here. So I guess that was me jumping over or anything. So I'm sorry that I missed a part of what you're saying.
The summary is that every obstacle, every lack, every structural weakness in your game plan, or in what you thought, you know, you would be getting and you're not getting, or something doesn't work, is information in and of itself. It's opportunity in and of itself. And addressing it head on and working with it is probably better for you as a maker, for the film itself, rather than trying to avoid it or pretend that didn't happen. I mean, that we all do in the end sift some of that stuff out in our editing, but in the process of making, I think it's always better to just to face those gaping holes head on.
Exactly, gaping holes head on. That really rhymes with me being absent. Thank you, because I was really how to say, it was just really amazing and beautiful what you said, and I was just wondering when Leszek was listening to it, did it sound familiar in any way to you, this kind of process of, you know, following and jumping and leaping and all of that as a musician? Does it sound familiar?
Yes, we were talking about the power of mistake in life and in music as well, especially in jazz music and improvised music, and also flamenco, I guess, where when mistake happens and you can use it. You can use it as a part of a material, you know. So I think the strongest and the best position about doing whatever in life and creating is accepting whatever has happened. Doesn't mean you approve it, but accept it. If you accept it, it means you can use it. You can use it, and you can really find yourself inside and find a proper way out by underlying it or counterpointing it, or you know, playing with it. So being creative doesn't really mean to follow the plan. It means just being open and follow whatever happens. And this is the most powerful position.
Mm-hmm. So now I would ask Stephen, actually, because it sounds like music can be a big inspiration if it comes to how you structure your film. And I wonder, how does it work for you as a filmmaker? Because when you make a movie about the musician, you can approach it in so many different ways, right? You can make this kind of tribute film that all the people gonna talk about the person, and you will feel that, oh my God, this guy was a saint, or you know, master of universe, and make this kind of structured bio documentary. Or you can actually do something, I guess maybe it's not more interesting, but something different that kind of comes in place when you meet those two worlds, that you can actually experiment with the form and do it in that way. So can you tell us something about your work in that aspect?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, every project is different, of course. And I think it really depends on what the project is and who your subject is. And for me, it's kind of important that, you know, I mean, I tend to get to work as a director on portrait type of projects of the subjects. And I think for me, I really like getting inspired by the artist and his or her work, first and foremost. And then I like to kind of have a relationship between the film and the person's art, which kind of mirror off of each other. I personally really enjoy collaboration. So I think, you know, when working with a living artist, it's great because you can actually collaborate with them and bounce off of what they have to say and what their music is like. So in the case of Coda, I really, you know, loved Ryuichi's way of hearing the world. Not just as a music artist per se, but also as a person. So I wanted my film to kind of reflect upon how he hears the world and interacts with it. And that kind of became my premise for the exploration that the film was. And at the same time, I'm a pretty greedy person as a filmmaker. So I start out with a big laundry list of all these great things I want to include in the movie. And I think when you're lucky, you have so many great things that they don't necessarily fit in one film. And it becomes a process of removal, extrapolation, minimizing. And I think so in a sense, you know, filmmaking for me is all about, first of all, getting into a lot of trouble, because it's always hard making a movie, and somehow getting yourself out of trouble. But as you do so, learning to accept, learning to really find the essence of what you have and to embrace that. And then to throw away, hopefully, everything else that you don't need.
Mm-hmm. Rachel, because you said that you only recently worked with a composer, so that's a bit different thing than making a film about the musician himself. But what kind of collaboration that you feel comes to place when you start to discuss your story with somebody who has the different language to tell us, to add something, some layer to your story if it comes to composing and musical aspect?
I had an incredibly positive experience, so I was sort of, you know, really, really relieved to not have been traumatized by it. but actually to be turned on by it. So it was the first time I worked with a composer. I worked with a man named Robert Marcel Lepage. He's out of Montreal. It was necessitated by the co-production agreement that I worked with somebody out of Quebec. And I met a few different people, and they gave me samples, and you could get a little bit of a sense of their interpretive vibe, sort of where they take their stuff. And I wasn't that excited. One of the problems with documentary film is you work with scratch music, you fall madly in love with your scratch music, even if it's not anything attainable, because you actually edit to it. It's not there to complement what you edit. You start to get reliant on it. It's a little bit like you get and then letting go of that and embracing something else is hard. So my scratch music was really, really, really raw and somewhat harsh percussion, and that's it. I have a character, the main character, Lea Tzemel, this Israeli Jewish lawyer who defends Palestinians, is very much like a little machine. She's sort of the little engine that could. And I just didn't want to be sentimental at all. I wanted just to feel that drive. She's just going and going and going and going, year after year, decade after decade. And so when I met a few different musicians, and I met Robert Marcel, and I described Lea as the Energizer Bunny. And assuming you guys all know, but when the Energizer Bunny, the Duracell ads come through, the Energizer Bunny comes through with these two, right? And it was just a description. And Robert Marcel came with his sample, and it sounded like the Energizer Bunny. So I was like, okay, funny. At least you're funny. Funny's good. Great. Let's talk music. And at first, I was just like, okay, that was a little. And then I just went, he was listening to me. He gave me, and that's sort of how the film opens. It's very like, talk, she's going. She's got her briefcase, and we're going down the courthouse hallways with her, and that's who she is. And it's going to end that way too. And after incredible, insane drama, and you're going to be like, okay, this is how she does it for 50 years. She's just going and going and going.
Good battery.
Yeah, so amazing battery, crazy battery. So, of course, it developed in all kinds of other directions. In addition, he forced me to have a little bit of harmonics. I said it had to be totally acoustic. So he brought some bowls, and, he found ways. There was like some string, but he just did things that were very raw, very unplugged, very manipulated, but acoustic, and everything is just totally analog, right? I wanted it to be analog, and so I sat with him, and pretty much throughout almost all the sessions. I mean, I edit in an incredibly rhythmical way. It's I do something terrible. I live in Israel. I make films that I know that whether they're in Hebrew and Arabic and they're going to go abroad, or if they're in English and they're going to be consumed here, I always know I have subtitles on my movies. And I never want my subtitles to bleed across cuts and to ruin the picture. I edit with subtitles in mind. It's terrible. It can be ever so slightly didactic. It's also really, 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 really clean, a little bit OCD. But it also makes for very rhythmic editing.
Sorry for this emotional reaction, because I'm a subtitler for like 15 years. And
you know what I'm talking about.
Difficult to subtitle just to be really, not
to blend. You want it to blend. You want it to sit on there and feel organic. And so I
thank you on behalf of all the subtitlers in the world. Thank you, Lea, for this, because nobody really thinks about that, and there are people in the world who need to read those subtitles.
So all documentary filmmakers, at least up to a point in their careers, have all kinds of secret little day jobs. They teach, they this, they that, and mine has been subtitle editing in the past. And and it's a form of music. It's another form of music. Anyway, it's like writing the notes on the screen to the music that you're hearing, or something like that, and you want it to correspond. So anyway, the experience was really positive, and I'm no longer scared of composers, whatever, scores.
Leszek, that's a good news. One filmmaker less in the world that is scared of musicians and composers and collaborations like that. But tell us a bit about your experience, because there's a lot of situations that you were composing the music for the film or working with the directors. How does it work on the other side of this tiny fence?
The main problem, or challenge rather, I'd call it a challenge, is that you cannot express what you expect from a composer with language. Because when you are using words, usually you don't understand each other, because musicians, we finished some studies and academies and all that, and we have so many words which exactly mean this and that, and they are taken from normal vocabulary, and it's very easy to misunderstand each other when you listen to the person. You have to rather feel the person, what she means, what is behind the language, and trusting it. That's how the main misunderstandings and misinterpretations happens. That you listen to what she or he says, rather than feel it, you know. So I think here the intuition and some kind of connection which doesn't happen on a verbal, linear, intellectual level. It has to happen on some higher selves, between higher selves. The interaction needs to go on energetical level, intuition, inspiration, intention, and all those kind of things which are not really material things. Then the cooperation is possible. If not, then you have to write music 3 or 4 times sometimes for the movie. Yeah.
What happens with those versions that you don't use? Do you use them sometimes later, or use them for other purposes, or it's just this kind of gone music that never happened really?
Well, you can use it if it doesn't sound like the music, because usually it sounds a bit alike, or little things which you can use it for, maybe not in a big production in the future, but you can use it as a help to your friend who has no budget and asks you to, could you please help me with this? I have a little sweet movie with my daughter, or with kids or something. Then you can easily use it, and if the material is completely separate, of course, you can use it as a part of a building process in the future.
That's really interesting. That it all works on this energetic and rhythmic level. Also, like, of course, like part of the communication is only what we are saying. The rest is happening somewhere in between those lines. It's kind of lost in translation sometimes, even.
Our souls are talking about completely different things than our intellect. So this is where
that's true. But the music can be a language that connects to people better than words. I don't know, like, do you believe in something like that? Let me just give you an example. Like, to make a story through music, I mean. Because of course in lockdown people are doing different things, and many different things, just to occupy themselves. So I did with my friends those challenges, you know, you probably are aware of people doing those challenges everywhere on social media, but we were doing only one, like on chat, sending us each other songs according to the list of things, and the playlist that happened is like a story of the 1 month of the quarantine for 2 people feeling about many different things, and it kind of tells a story. So it's also possible to use it in that way. I don't know, just I'm not a musician, not a filmmaker, but music plays major part, not minor, in my life. So also this kind of thing always comes to a place. But Steven, tell me, like, when you think about music as a tool for storytelling, what does it really mean for you? Because as just to come back more from those abstract things that we are talking about, which are really beautiful and important, but to the films themselves, there are so many different types of documentary filmmaking if it comes to music. But what do you feel from your experience works best? I mean, like, what kind of films you like? I mean, documentaries, You don't have to give me any titles from Krakow Film Festival, but in general, what do you think works well when you try to connect those two words?
Oh, that's such a fascinating question. I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer.
Of course there isn't.
I think I really appreciate the magic when things work well. And I personally like things that seem to just have a logic of their own and they work. For example, you say, how can you make music work? Well, you know, everything is relative in film and in editing. So for example, one of the things I love doing was when you have great music and great material, hopefully, and then just to have a sequence that's completely silent. Because the absence of sound is also music. To me, that's like, you know, a good bass player really plays with that, you know, the silence between notes. And so in being blessed, you know, to work with a project that had amazing musical notes and a lot of amazing musical content, I loved finding a moment that was purely silent, you know, and that's music too. So I think for me, you know, the greatest joy of working with musical content is to get to really be playful with the music, to be musical in your approach. I kind of at times felt like I get to be like a DJ or something, you know, like a house music DJ or something, you know, creating transitions between different songs and whatever. At times, just with juxtaposition alone, you could actually create music with light, you know, flashes. I personally, sometimes I shoot performances. I love working with like a team of cameramen who understand music. So they're always looking for what happens next in a musical way, which makes me feel like they're dancing to the music as opposed to just being there trying to compose the shots that they're imposing upon the action. So I guess I'm looking for fluidity and a kind of, you know, a kind of harmonious coexistence, if you will, with the musical material. And there's no logic. I think, I mean, they're a formally educated music artist, which I'm not. I'm sure I can tell you all kinds of things about the logical reasons and the mathematical formulations that are behind music, but I don't have a formal musical education, so I'm more improvisational, freeform. And I love being able to kind of riff off of great musical work through my medium.
Thank you. Rachel, what do you look for when you look at the music documentary? What kind of films feel inspiring for you? And what's the golden rule of that, if there is any?
I mean, this is my first time during a music documentary section, you know, so, and came up for us was a kind of a question of, well, what is the criteria for judging a music documentary? The variety was huge in terms of form and content and approach and quality. I mean, it was just a really big range in all of those respects. And so we kind of agreed if we're to go to take the cue of the programmers, it's really a really big, it's a very loose and big range of possibilities. And so I think what I looked for was not unlike what I look for in anything. The content is engaging, the form is inspiring, there's harmony between the two, or there's interplay that feels, you know, that makes sense, that, you know, that 1 + 1 = 3, right? That something else happens there, that there's an added value to the way things are put together and communicated. Without, I can't say, I was going to say something about how we handled that in the end, which we can't say. But I would say that every single criteria or aspect of why I would judge any other film to be wonderful or great or better or worse would be in effect here, with the caveat that that the music should probably predominate and be an experience in and of itself, not an illustration of itself, but rather an experience in and of itself, and that's not a hard fast rule, and doesn't necessarily make a film good. But if I were to think of it as a category, I would say that would probably be very high up there in terms of what matters.
Mm-hmm. And if I may add one question to you, because you are politically engaged as a filmmaker, so when you see films, there are so many, I'm not talking about the competition here, I'm talking in general, because I tend to watch documentaries about musicians, about music itself. Mm-hmm. There's really often there is this level or a layer of political aspect to it. So do you find that this adds to the value of the film when a filmmaker decides that, okay, I'm telling the story about music and this person or this group or this culture, but now the political aspect of it. What do you think about that tendency? Is it something that makes you like, oh, that's my thing, I'm interested?
Totally, and my jury members would corroborate. It's true for every film, in a sense. It doesn't have to be about a political issue per se, mm-hmm. but is there political awareness about how the issue is being handled? Is there implicit or explicit awareness about power relations, about the politics of representation, about who's telling whose story and on what terms? And is the camera here or is the camera here? Are people being made to look smaller and weaker, or are they being aggrandized? What does it mean? What does eye level mean? And I mean that literally and figuratively. Those questions are always there for me. And if they're tackling an issue, are they tackling it black and white, or are they tackling it dark gray and whatever, and beige, off-white, right? How are they handling human complexity beyond the political, where the political is like, if it's seemingly not a political film, mm-hmm. I want them to go political nevertheless. And if it's clearly a political topic, I want them to go human. I want them to scale back a little bit on dogma and on, and to look at those shades, right? Those other shades other than black and white. And that's the same for any story about, or any topical treatment of something for
mm-hmm.
me. It's the
yes.
kind of animal that I am as a filmmaker and as a
mm-hmm.
waking up and going to the grocery store. I'll choose the cheese I want, but it doesn't mean I don't stand there going, well, if I choose that cheese.
Of course, always questioning and looking for the under level of that. Leszek, what's your perspective on that? Because we are talking about what kind of films about music we like. I'm like, there is this need that I have to ask you, like, what kind of films in general you like, but let's focus on documentaries. What do you look in them
actually, documentaries are my favorite. And talking about politics, notice that we also have cadenzas in politics. And cadenza has two phases, which is dominant, which is problem, and solution, which is tonic. But a really good cadenza has three phases, which is subdominant, which is preparing to the problem, offering the problem or presenting the problem, and then offering a solution. So this is exactly what's happening in politics. It's like music. Exactly like in music, we have this thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, or some people call it problem, reaction, solution. So first they find out the tonic they want to go to, and then they create all the cadenza to achieve a certain position in law or in situation, economics, or whatever. So this is exactly like in music. That's why I think playing music is for me, a spiritual tool to stay free, and not to be afraid anymore. And this is what I expect from a good movie, that after watching a movie, I feel that my consciousness went kind of wider, that I'm not afraid of my life anymore, that there's something about it after watching the movie that it makes it so wide and so abstract in a way that I feel safe again. Mm-hmm. Because I don't understand it that far, that the only solution is to trust the higher forces or powers, because force and power, they are different things. So higher power, that there's somebody who knows what's going on is ruling it.
But is it possible with documentaries, because they tend to have this like strong relationship with the, let's say, the real world? They are not really, they are really authentic, even when they are kind of non-fiction, fiction slashing those borders and so on and so forth. They tend to have the big relationship with the reality. So is it possible for you to get that from documentaries when you watch them?
I don't remember who said it. That you can read a really wise book, but if your mind is so tiny or shallow, your understanding will be the same. So I think understanding any movie depends of your own progress and how far you went with information and with how with spirituality and all that. And for example, we saw a very beautiful movie which is called Africa Mia. And for example, the main message I got from this movie is that music can actually play a role into creating in creating a nation. So there was a beautiful documentary which said about Mali. They were fighting for the nation. They were trying to use music for that, for example. And so there are really strong and important topics and subjects inside every single movie. If you see it, if you're able to see it behind all the scenes and editing and everything.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you have any comments on that, Stephen, Rachel? What do you think?
Stephen.
Stephen, are you with us, Stephen?
Yes, I am. No, I don't really have much to add. I was just thinking how wonderful of a jury I've gotten to work with this time. I mean, it's just, you know, I can't speak for myself, but at least for the two others, I mean, just fascinating minds, and, you know, they pretty much said it all for me. And it's been not easy choosing, you know, which movies should be the winner. It's such a diverse selection, you know, but really, you know, being able to work with these two fellow artists has been a great joy for me and a great learning process. And I was just taken in awe by hearing them speak. So sorry, I was being quiet because of that. I felt like I have nothing.
As you were saying before, that sometimes you get quiet when something is going on around you, that you just want to focus on it. Yeah, yeah, like actually listening to what all of you are saying is really, you know, enriching for me because this meeting on Zoom, of course, is something difficult for all of us. It's difficult to communicate. But I wanted to ask you about, you know, you had to watch 9 films, none of them in the cinema, none of them during the, you know, the experience that the festival is. So how was this process for you? Was it something that, okay, I can do it, it's normal thing? Or you just felt that, you know, it's this question about lockdown, but I'm like, you know, kind of trying to make it a bit more interesting, that how's the lockdown for you, because you've heard it probably 100 times before. So this process of being part of festival and jury duty in that manner, and also meeting probably as we are meeting now to discuss the films, is there anything that you would say is positive about that experience? That's what I wanted to ask, actually, because I know it's difficult and so on and so forth, but I'm looking for the, you know, nice parts, pluses.
Well, there's a lot that's positive for sure. I mean, here we are, you know, together, even though I wish I could have been in Krakow, and I regret not being able to visit. But, you know, it's certainly, I tried to imagine that, you know, I was watching the films in the cinema, you know, because that's what I like to do. That's how I like to watch films as much as possible. But of course, that couldn't be done. But, you know, one of the great things was, I think there are 2 things for me. One is, you know, just the mere fact that I could sit in my living room or bedroom and watch these films and feel like I've been able to travel around the world and understand music and celebrate music in some way. That meant a lot to me as an experience, not necessarily as a jury member, but just as a person. And then secondly, I really appreciate the effort that the festival is making to just go forward regardless, because it kind of gave me as a filmmaker a sense of purpose that, you know, we could still do something like this and share our expertise and understanding and knowledge, even though it's been extremely humbling, because I think it's extremely hard to make a movie. It's really hard to judge movies too, but getting to do that with my fellow colleagues in this way, it's been all positive, really. I mean, except I wish I could be in Poland and be enjoying the local food and culture more, but hopefully they'll invite us back next year or whenever it's possible.
Yeah, like I guess they're gonna invite the people that were supposed to come this year and the people from next year, right? And it's gonna be like a big.
I hope so, and then we just get to enjoy Poland and not even judge film or something. But
yeah, that would be really lovely. Rachel, how does those things work for you on the positive level? Let's keep it that way.
It's going to be mixed, but it's an understandable mixed. I've been incredibly grateful that in the last 2-3 months that I work in a medium which can be consumed, for lack of a better word, engaged with, without actually needing to be audience based, and it's not real time performance. I feel really lucky. I see what's happening economically. I see what, you know, it's not that our field isn't going to suffer. It's more than anything due to economic sort of domino effects. But I'm grateful. I have people friends in the performing arts, family in the performing arts, and their life has really shifted and they're much more vulnerable. So I love that I work in a medium that isn't that can be dealt with or interacted with in several different ways. With that said, and this is an example, it worked, and I think anybody who's running festivals or markets and rising to the occasion are doing something right by keeping people connected and trying to keep the motors running and the projects that can be developing and so on. With that said, I think that just like in our lives where we're overly reliant on social media and in the digital age, nothing beats a good conversation. Nothing beats being able to actually look people in the eyes. I really, really don't like doing Zoom Q&As. I tried a few, you know, when people were desperate for content. I was getting a lot of offers to do, to screen to an organization, to a community, to a group, or whatever kind of audience it was. And I stopped really soon because I couldn't stand looking at myself all the time. Nobody spends that much time in front of the mirror. And it took a long time to figure out that I could turn off the thing. And I couldn't feel people. And it's not like in a Q&A I'm touching people, you know, but we're in a room and there's just a different vibe. And I just don't think that anything equals that. It doesn't mean that you can't enjoy a film on a small screen with headphones on your laptop, whatever. It's doable, and that's wonderful. But there's other magic that happens that's interactive, and we shouldn't lose sight of it. And we should make a point of finding ways to meet the Greta Thunberg standard and still travel and still connect, and you know.
Yeah, like in the beginning, everybody was saying like, "Oh, those meetings could be Zooms. Those meetings could be emails."
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. But
yes and
today,
no. Yes and no. Yeah.
I actually learned a new word today. It's in Yiddish. It's not like I learn Yiddish, but my friend does, and she taught me this. And the word is ausgesummt, which means overexposed to, fatigued by, exhausted from, bored by, headed with Zoom. Yeah. Ich bin azoi ausgesummt. So that's the word that we can start using sooner or later. Ausgesummt. It has all in it. Really funny, but at the same time, that's the only thing that we can do at this moment. So tell us, please, Leszek, how working with your co-jurors, because I can feel in here in Warsaw that the energy in between you three was really great, and that the conversation must have been really interesting. But how all this new idea of communicating in that way works for you, and how is also with not being part of the festival that you probably wanted to be part of?
Yeah, you know, being alone and watching a movie with yourself means being with somebody who you finally understand, you know. So this is a nice part of it. And of course, I miss the resonance between people, you know. But also, if I didn't experience it while watching the movies, I was able to have my own private or personal judgment from the beginning to the end. I didn't share with anybody. I was watching movies alone. I didn't see the reactions of people, because sometimes they can program you. Even if you see somebody on a chair, you know, moving certain way or reacting to things, it just, you resonate with it. It programs you in a certain way. So I think it was kind of pure. I kind of like it. Of course, we can discuss about the frequency of the computer light, which you know, hits your eyes from the screens. There are some interesting scientists examining it, and this is a different story. I'm not sure if it's really a pure and then the best frequency of light the human body can experience. I think it's not the best, maybe wave to communicate between people. That's why we got so tired, because it's a certain frequency of light of the screen which we experience while doing this interview. But it has pluses and minuses, like everything on material level. You know, matter always produces shadow. So you choose what you choose to experience.
That was really deep. I mean, like, it's good that it's deep, because the answers to those questions always differ if it comes to different people. So I think we can slowly not go back to the beginning, go towards the end of our conversation. But I wanted to ask our dear musician if he could play something more for all of us to oh, I knew. I'm the one that can ask, you know.
I don't know if the sound is good.
It's beautiful.
Maybe I can play a simple melody of my friend Lars Danielsson. This is all based on the main connection. It's all cadenzas, you know.
All cadenzas. Kmicic joined us. I mean, my cat, because he likes music a lot. I guess that can be a nice ending to our critical discussion. Thank you for being with us. I hope it was a nice hour to spend with Krakow Film Festival for you all. It was amazing for me. And I hope that we're going to have a chance to talk in person one day. Maybe we're going to meet somehow, someday, maybe next year in Krakow. That would be just really lovely. So can I ask you to wave a bit to the camera, because I'm going to make a screenshot for the festival and for my collection of screenshots during Zoom conversations. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening and your day. I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. I got a bit emotional because of this music, so that's the thing that happened also in here. Dziękuję, drodzy Państwo. Mam nadzieję, że to było dla Was interesujące spotkanie. Do zobaczenia na krakowskim festiwalu filmowym i na kolejnych spotkaniach. Miejmy nadzieję już wkrótce w prawdziwym świecie. The last thing I said was, let's hope for the meetings in the real world really soon. So thank you once again. Bye.
Kaja, thank you. It was very lovely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.